taking this advantage. The churches around the country, around the world, are perhaps taking down their decorations from Christmas, Advent, either this Sunday, perhaps last Sunday. But we're going to sing a number of carols this morning. One doesn't have the chance to sing them all that often. So we'll be joining in a number of those today as we remember the special time that we've been a part of. Would you now, though, join with me in our call to worship? With our united voices, let us praise God who gave us the gift of His Son.
We celebrate the glory of God's kingdom. We are awed by God's power.
In the life of Jesus, we see the nature of God. In His life, we have been in the presence of the divine.
God's love was revealed in His life. In Him we can find life.
Would you stand and join with me in the carol Joy to the World? Well, as you note on the back of your bulletin, there is a newsletter being planned for this week, and we would welcome any kind of article that you might share with us. The easiest way to do that is just to email them to Karen or drop by the office there in St. John. But most of that we hope is going to be put together by Wednesday, so if you have something, please send that along. Yesterday, we were at a service for one of the fellows who has been a part of our camp staff for many, many years. I thought, as I tried to remember back when they first became involved, I was thinking that when I got started again at that camp after an absence when I was in college and seminary and worked a few years at Camp Horizon, that they were there. My wife corrected me and said, no, they came a bit after we got part of that camp again. And that they came back the summer that our youngest son was born. So we've had a pretty good handle on that. So they've been involved in great many years as part of the staff and part of the camp. He was very active in his church and his community, and he had something else about him. He was definitely a Jayhawk fan. So part of the service the family requested was that people wear something about KU, and thus my tie today. And Karen suggested, why don't you wear that tomorrow, kind of in Bob's honor, because he was a strong Christian person that did touch a lot of lives. So, apologies to K-State fans, but seems worthy of sharing a bit about somebody that's been a part of my life through the years. Are there other announcements? Hopes, joys, concerns?
Well, Anna Menace fell yesterday afternoon and broke her wrist. And it's a bad break, I think.
I didn't get back till late last night. The service was in Kansas City, so I had not heard that. One wonders how many things are going to be around town in trouble. I know she's involved in a good many things. Is she in the hospital? Has she been treated?
No, she's at home. Her family's with her.
Okay. Well, I'll have to stop and say hello. Does somebody have some good news?
Well, I have one more concern, and I'm going to apologize to my family right now because they haven't heard this, because my cousin Mike Munns called me late yesterday afternoon and told me that he has a tumor on his throat, in his salivary gland, I think it is. Anyway, he is going in Wednesday for the CT scan, and it's going to, like I said, I'm going to apologize because I didn't tell anybody yet. But I just thought we ought to pray for Mike, because many people here know Mike, and he's, speaking of fans, he's quite a St. John Tiger fan. So we're hopeful that it's just a minor thing, but we're prepared for anything. He's prepared for anything. He's a good Christian, and he said whatever happens, happens, and he's looking forward to finding out what it is that he needs to do. So, but everybody would pray for him. That's a great outcome on this tumor.
I just want to thank everybody for the cards and prayers and visits that I got while I was in the hospital. I've still got a ways to go. I'm back here.
Yay!
Well, we had a new great-granddaughter born last week, Savannah and Ryan Clark. Pretty little girl, Addison Page.
All right. Are there others?
Well, I asked some time ago for prayers for cousin Grant Miller in the Eden Valley community, and thank you, because Grant is much improved, and he is in St. John with his parents, or in the Eden Valley community with his parents, but I saw him on Friday, and he's pale and wan, but not wan, but wan, and he is so thankful for everything, that all the prayers from people, because he's coming back. And it was a reaction to anesthetic and chemicals and medication, and it's been taken a toll on a young man. He's better.
Good. Well, let me invite all of us to join in some time of silent prayer as each of us comes to God in our own way, our own thoughts, and then joining together as a congregation. congregation. Oh God, as we come, we give thanks for this time once again to be together. A new year has begun. We can look back over the past year and see so many ways that our lives have been touched by you, by others, by circumstances around us. And we know in each case that we were with you, that we were never alone. As we begin this year and look forward to the future, we wonder what it might hold. We have concerns about health, some recovering. Mike, who is looking towards knowing what might face him. Others also. Be with each one of us, though, as we continue this journey of life. And as we do, may we be aware that we are all partners with one another, fellow travelers, persons who are to help each other along the way, and most importantly, persons who share that journey with you. As we continue in our lives, may we feel your presence and your power, because we know that each one of us has a way that we have been called to serve you in our daily lives, in the work that we do, and the people that we meet, and all the contacts that we happen to have. May we use each one to help your kingdom come more fully into being. A kingdom which your Son talked of again and again. A kingdom which he helped begin in a fresh new way. A kingdom whose vision he shared with his disciples. A kingdom which he shared about in the prayer he has taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Well, I'm going to ask you to imagine that the candles of Advent are there yet, or that one of the altar candles, which are a part of our service each Sunday. Not only this church, but in churches around the world, a candle burns to remind each one the symbolism that as we come and as we worship together, that God's presence is with us. And as a service concludes, as that flame is taken out of the sanctuary, a reminder that God's Spirit is to go with us through the events of the week. So would you take your bulletin and join with me? The Christ candle continues to burn, a light which reminds us of Christ, the light of the world.
Though the Advent bring its candles and the other decorations will soon be put away.
The influence of Christ continues through the year. The light of his life is ours to share.
The light of our world and the people in it need in their lives. This light is the greatest need in their lives.
And will you join in the first and the fourth verses of Angels from the Realms of Glory? boys out there, do you think they were ever that small? Yeah. Been a year or two, probably, if they were. Well, they grew. You grew. Can you imagine how much you've grown already? Do you think you're supposed to do that? Probably. Yeah. How many ways can you think of that you're growing? Are you getting taller? Getting heavier? Oh, you're not sure. They usually kind of go together. Can you talk? Could you talk when you were a little baby? So you're probably growing in that way. How about walking? Did you start walking the day you were born like some animals? So you've grown in that way too. And you probably have grown a great deal in how your mind works. Because babies, they're just they don't know much of anything, do they? And you already know a lot of different things. How to read, and language, all of those things. So all the ways that you're growing, why, there's some important ways we grow around here. And with parents and Sunday school, we're supposed to grow in our faith. We're supposed to grow in our knowledge about Jesus. We're supposed to grow in what we know about what's in the Bible. Those are all ways that we can grow. Now, what happens if you stop growing? Would you want to be that same size you are right now the rest of your life? No, you'd have a hard time getting on a basketball team, wouldn't you? And you probably couldn't be quarterback. And it's the same with Christians. They're supposed to grow in their faith if we're to be the kind of people God wants us to be. Unfortunately, there are some Christians that are kind of like a baby. They are born and they get started and then they just kind of stop growing. They just never develop very well as a Christian. But God calls us to keep growing until we're 20. Right. When it comes to being a Christian, you never stop growing. You're not supposed to, no matter how old you are. Thanks for coming up. Let's have a prayer. Oh God, we give thanks for all the ways that we can grow, for little talents and abilities that we sometimes are born with, that we can grow and develop into something useful and helpful. For the ability to grow in so many other ways. Help us to continue growing as your followers in our faith, in our knowledge, in the way we live our lives. Amen. Would one of you like to take this and bring... You're faster than your sister. Thank you. Yes. You know, it's long enough ago that I didn't even recognize anybody there.
Remember that day.
Well, there are all kinds of gifts, aren't they? And as we think about gifts, I invite our usher to come forward as we receive our offerings, our gifts back to God. Join with me in our prayer of dedication. Oh God, as we remember once again the story of the gift of Christ to the world, we offer our gifts in these moments. We do so in the knowledge that the gift you want most of all from us to be His followers. May we rise to that challenge. Amen. Please be seated and join with me in yet another of our carols singing the first verse of "O Come All Ye Faithful." The scripture for this morning comes from the last chapter of the book of Ephesians, the beginning of several times that we're going to look at what Paul lifted up in these last few verses. Finally, build up your strength in union with the Lord, and by means of His mighty power. Put all the armor that God gives you on, so that you will be able to withstand the devil's tricks. For we are not fighting against human beings, but against the wicked spiritual forces in the heavenly world, the rulers, authorities, and cosmic powers of this dark age. So put on God's armor now. Then, when that evil day comes, you will be able to resist the enemy's attack. And after fighting to the end, you will be able to hold your ground. So stand ready with truth as a belt tight around your waist. Well, let me admit that there are some movies that you wouldn't think would be sermon material. One of those is Dirty Harry. I think I perhaps saw a scene from one of those when I suspect it was on TV. But it went something like this. Harry is a famous policeman, of course, is involved in the shooting. And I suspect it's his partner suddenly shouts when it's all over and Harry's left standing, "Harry, you shot an unarmed man!" And Harry's rather calm reply is, "Well, he should have armed himself." Now that probably wouldn't be the end of it in today's real world, but in movies all kinds of things are possible. And I think Harry's line has some real value because in our world I think there are a lot of Christians around who you might say are going around unarmed in their faith. They really don't have much of a grounding. They're really just kind of out there floating along, and they don't have much to meet the challenges of life. One of the things that Paul did in one of his letters to several different churches was to lift up some armor, as it were, for Christians in his day, and I think in ours as well. Paul, as he wrote this letter, was writing something different than most of his other letters. Most of the other letters that you read in the New Testament that Paul wrote to various churches were written to answer questions that perhaps were sent to him, or they were written for specific situations or difficulties that churches were encountering. This letter to Ephesians is more a general kind of encouragement and lifting up the majesty of God. Paul wrote it from jail, from prison. He was a prisoner for his faith. Part of that was the fact that he was chained by the wrist to a soldier 24 hours a day. So no matter when he might open his eyes, standing or sitting beside him was a living example of what he, in this letter, transforms into an encouragement for Christians. What he saw before him was a Roman soldier. What he saw before him was the equipment that Roman soldiers had with them. And with that equipment of war, Rome had carved out an empire greater than the world had ever known to that point. And Paul took those weapons and armor that a soldier carried, weapons of war, and he turned it into something completely different, the armor that a Christian might use. Paul lifts up these items that we'll be looking at today and in weeks to come and says these are essential. He lays out before us the idea that in life we need something beyond our own strength. If you're involved in some kind of a sport, if you, for example, were a wrestler, you don't need armor. In fact, it isn't allowed. Although I've occasionally seen little pro wrestlers on television, it seems like anything's allowed there. But you don't have armor for a sport. More than that, you in a sport are mostly depending on your own power and the team. And Paul is saying in this that, well, I should say not only Paul, but the whole of the Bible has behind it the idea that the battles that we're involved in trying to lead a Christian life are so difficult, so important, that we need help from beyond ourselves. We're still in the mood of the Christmas celebration, and it's based on the idea that God came and visited this world, that He brought help from outside to help people learn how to live. Paul called people in these verses to stand firm That's advice that has so often, when nation has battled nation, been critical, because it's often the army that stands firm that is the winner of the battle. Paul is calling Christians to stand firm as well. Not for just a bit, but for a whole lifetime. Jesus once said there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. And he's really talking about the fact that, well, nations sometimes come up against nation in battle. But that is often somewhat temporary. Think, in the last century, there were 2 world wars. And now we are friends with those nations we battled with. Paul is lifting up the reality that the battle he's talking about is one that there is no peace treaty. The battle he's talking about began with the earliest persons who walked this earth, and it will continue to the very end of time. That there is no end to the battle Paul calls people to. All of that, you might say, is a bit of an introduction to what Paul then begins to lay out as the armor that a Christian ought to have. He begins with a belt. A very common kind of item. And yet, that's where he begins, because it's so essential to the rest of the uniform. On it, the sword hung that was, well, indispensable in battle. The breastplate that most used to protect their vital organs was somehow connected to that belt and held in place by it. A belt made possible for a soldier to move around quickly but not get all tangled up in his equipment. It was essential, because without a belt, everything fell apart. Paul is saying truth for a Christian is like that. Without truth, no matter what else you have, it all falls apart. When you've said that, though, one might consider the question that Pilate asked Jesus when Jesus was on trial. Pilate simply asked, "What is truth?" It's a cynic's kind of question. It's the question that the person who's given up on ever finding the truth might ask. But it's also one of the most important questions a person can ask. Truth is essential. Truth is that thing that, well, without that, everything else falls apart. Truth is kind of important as we begin to see the political race is getting kind of heated. And truth is going to be essential in that. Trying to find what really are the facts. There have been monstrous lies put out in our world, great sins against truth, you might say. I mentioned just a little bit ago the fact that this nation was involved in a world war not all that many years ago. And one of the nations we battled with was built on a monstrous lie of a master race. And that lie required other lies to support it. When one thinks of all the people who died, of the incredible destruction that came out of that war, one might consider the idea that truth is really a weak, tired little thing that really doesn't have much power at all. And yet, truth does have power. Truth has staying power. Evil sometimes appears to win the day, but when lies and evil have burned themselves out, truth remains. Truth remains because truth comes from God. An example of that might be the early church. When it began, it was 12 disciples, a few others. They were given the job of going out and changing the entire world. They were given the job of going out and telling about their leader, who had been a carpenter, and then had given up shaping wood and began to shape the lives of men and women. One who had attracted followers, but he had also so antagonized some that he was put to death as a criminal. Those few individuals weren't even a tiny speck in the entire Roman Empire. Their chances of success, of doing what the mission they were given, were less than zero. And yet, as one looks at what has happened in our world, Rome and its incredible empires is just a memory to some, and not even that to others. And the faith in that carpenter is shared by billions of people all over the world. Truth has that same kind of power. It is never going to be defeated because God is truth, and truth comes from God. The friend I mentioned earlier, whose service we attended yesterday, was a person who was quite involved in his church and volunteering in a number of things after he had retired. Well, he's involved in the church all through his life. He, as people spoke about him, because people in the audience were invited to share thoughts, one of the first was one of his son-in-laws, who talked about the fact that Bob's faith was not just something for Sunday and church, but it was something that was a part of his whole life. And he gave one example. He, at one time, was working for a delivery company, and he, on one particular day, had a job of delivering an item to the workplace of his father-in-law. His father-in-law was in the process of retiring, and when this man arrived at that business, got on the elevator to deliver his package, he happened to be on the elevator with two other men who were talking about getting something done for the business. And then suddenly one of them thought, well, that's what Bob has done. Who's going to do it now? And then they went on to talk about the fact about the man, and that he had brought the influence of his faith to his job. I don't think it was ever in any kind of way that offended anyone, but it was the kind of faith that showed year by year to those around him. That's truth in a personal kind of way, because truth is on several levels. It can be personal, where a person lives with integrity in their lives and a kind of a constancy that faith is lived out each day. Truth can be on a social or a national level. There are some who believe that they can build something, whether they're individuals or a nation or a society, they can build something on a lie. But the fact is, those will find themselves fighting not only against the power of truth, but against God, against God. There's a statement that most are familiar with that one finds in the 8th chapter of John's Gospel. It's very simple. It simply says this: you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Amen. would you join in our hymn? You may not be terribly familiar with the hymn, but I think you will with the tune that goes with it. Make me a captive, Lord, singing the first, the second, and the fourth verses. Let's stand as we sing. Will you join in the benediction, which reminds us once again of the incredible gift God sent to us. The glory of the Lord shone over them. The angel said to them, "Don't be afraid.